All right, so before we just dive right into the debate coverage, I wanted to go over a few things. And I've mentioned this on TikTok, and I'll mention it here too. When you take a look at this poll, you see that Harris is ahead by 1.5%. What this doesn't factor is the Electoral College. Now, in 2016, Trump lost by 2 points. The polls had him losing by 3 points. But because we go by the Electoral College, he won by quite a bit. He could have lost like 2 more states, still won the election. So Harris being up 1.5% is more like Trump being up 2. If the election were held today, based on these numbers, Trump would win the election. The Democrats know this and are trying to pull ahead to at least 5 points ahead. That's right around where Biden was in the last election. This will probably be one of the closest elections in U.S. history. So here are the rules to the debate. No muted microphones, no props or pre-written notes, no audience, no sitting, no interaction during commercial breaks, and 90 minutes. So the muted microphones, that was broken immediately. The moderators did a horrible job with that. Now, as far as no props or pre-written notes, traditionally that means no note-taking during the debate, too, which is what Kamala Harris was doing. So I'm going to skip the opening statements and we're going to jump right into the meat and potatoes of this.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us.
Full stop. As the pandemic was happening, everyone knew that the Democrats were going to use whatever happened to the economy against Trump, acting like it was just his policies that sucked and there wasn't a global pandemic which halted everything. CNN fact-checked this, MSNBC fact-checked this. It had to do with a pandemic, not necessarily his policies.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
That's not true. The unemployment rate was only 6% when Trump left office. It was higher throughout Obama's entire presidency. Getting back down to that number during a pandemic is actually very impressive.
Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century.
Damn it, Trump, how dare you leave a global pandemic that started in China to the Biden administration?
Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
She said that on September 10th. The next day, there's a 9/11 memorial service. She either thinks that the American voters are dumb, we have short memory, or she has short memory.
And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling.
Now, I mentioned this on TikTok. There was scripted Kamala Harris and unscripted Kamala Harris. Unscripted Kamala Harris, name-calling, insults, you're a threat to democracy, you're weak, you're pathetic, all the leaders think you're weak and pathetic. And then on-script Kamala Harris talks about name-calling. As far as I don't think Trump called her a name once during this entire debate.
What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again.
Okay, so people close to Trump's inner circle have endorsed Project 2025 and actually worked on it. But he himself claims to not know about it and doesn't endorse it. One thing that's kind of weird about Trump is he's center-right, but his base is far-right.
I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
See, that's a good end of a message right there, to be a president for everyone, the Democrats and Republicans, and even the people that you have disparaged in the past. In Kamala Harris's case, it's young people.
What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid. That is why we put them in dormitories, and they have a resident assistant. They make really bad decisions.
That's obviously not true. Everybody matures at different levels. People who are between the ages of 18 and 24 aren't always, quote, stupid, young, and impressionable. By 25, I had 2 children, a house, and I had already graduated from college.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic, and the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
And you can't really give Trump credit for 100% of it. The United States has the most agile economy in the world, and it is not even close. We're predisposed to just recover the best.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So, Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy.
So I haven't seen a lot of people fact check that, but that's not true. Here is the Goldman Sachs CEO.
That report, which was mentioned last night in the debate, came from an independent analyst. And it's interesting, Scott. I think a lot more has been made of this than should be. What the report did is it looked at a handful of policy issues that have been put out by both sides, and it tried to model their impact on GDP growth. And the reason I say a bigger deal's been made of it is what it showed is the difference between the sets of policies that they put forward was about 0.2%. Okay, so economy grows. Okay, if you took these particular sets of policies they looked at, and by the way, we have no idea whether these policies, these things that are talked about, will ultimately be implemented. What was the growth impact? And the differential was 0.2%.
So, I mean, can't really fact check that one as false because her economy would technically be 0.2% better, but it wasn't Goldman Sachs who said that. So that one I wouldn't say false, it's just pretty misleading.
What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit.
Okay, I'm sorry, the misophonia is killing me right now. Everybody needs to have water. On the debate stage and the moderators. It sounds like they're mixing macaroni and cheese when they're talking, and I can't stand it. I'm sorry, continue.
16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession.
They actually did. She was right. But they said the same exact thing about hers. They estimate that the Kamala Harris campaign tax and spend proposals would increase primary deficits by $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years on a conventional basis and by $2 trillion on a dynamic basis that includes a reduction in economic activity. See, Trump's problem is they're eating the dogs. They want to do transgender surgery to illegal aliens in prison. Is a bit crazier than all of the misstatements that Kamala Harris made. So a lot of people don't see those and hear those.
You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
Okay, again, both the Wharton School and Goldman Sachs says your economic proposals aren't that much different from each other.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences.
I just think it's hilarious that they both say that neither one of them have a plan, yet their plans are almost identical, according to the leading economist in the world. I kind of pre-fact checked those. That was not what the Wharton School said about Trump's economic plan. The Wharton School said there's actually quite a bit difference, and that Trump would add $5.8 billion, and Kamala Harris would only add 1.2. What was so obvious during the debate, you'll see it now that I said it. She was told to try to make a meme-worthy face. Like, it sounds weird, but I know what I'm talking about. I've done debate prep before, especially in the age of the internet. It's like, no, we need some memes. We need some good ones. Bat your eyes at him. Laugh at him and everything he says. And she just, went over the top. Now, this is why I say every now and again you should glance over at your opponent in the middle of a debate. Because if he saw all of these faces, he could have been like, hold on, excuse me 1 second. Are you all right? Just notice that you're, smiling and blinking at me. You don't have to be nervous. It's okay. And because you address your opponent directly, they have time to respond. The only thing she could say is that, no, I'm not nervous. Or then she can say everything you say is funny, and then that kind of, now she's on defense. So if you find yourself in a debate with an opponent that's doing that, address it directly and immediately. This tactic did not work against him at all. She was able to get under his skin with the things she was saying, however.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have, and who's going to have higher prices, is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now.
Okay, so they're both wrong, and here's why. So Kamala Harris is going after Trump for the tariffs. She says that that's going to increase prices for the consumer. However, Biden increased the tariffs on China. He just finalized it. So Biden is actually, on paper, tougher on China than he was. I mean, he kind of started all of it. And she's saying that they shouldn't be as tough. Trump implemented sweeping tariffs on about $300 billion of Chinese-made products when he was in office. President Joe Biden has kept those tariffs in place, and after the USTR finished a multi-year review earlier this year, decided to increase some of those rates on about $15 billion of Chinese imports. So if she wants to go after Trump on this and stay consistent, she should be going after Biden and herself on this as well.
Now, under their administration, we are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
Well, you haven't seen a bad period of time at all because you're a billionaire. But the inflation rate was at its worst in 1980, with a 14% inflation rate. Damn, I'm tired already. We're only a few minutes into this thing.
The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Now, pretty much across the board, American voters say that Trump would be better with immigration and the economy. But it's not like 70, 80, or 90%. There's an 8-point difference.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Now, when Kamala Harris gives a scripted answer, she'll always say, now let's be clear here. Now let's be clear with the American people.
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century.
He didn't sell out to China. In fact, Biden is continuing what he started. While the Biden administration has expanded controls on the export of critical technologies to China since 2022, experts note that Trump started the trend back in 2019 when his administration banned sales to companies such as Chinese smartphone maker Huawei.
Which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
So he sent that tweet on January 24th, 2020, about 6 weeks before the World Health Organization declared the spreading disease a pandemic and widespread shutdowns happened in the U.S. So if he sent that in December 2020, that would have been a lot different. All right, so that concludes part 1. If I missed anything, and I'm sure I did because there was so much, leave it down below in the comments. Part 2 will be posted as soon as it's ready.